Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
As a business and healthcare law firm, we are sometimes triggered by certain buzzwords our clients will say in conversation. We know there's potential disaster when we hear these words and are immediately on high alert. This season's theme is red flags.
Oh, yeah, Michael.
Ding. You dominated in our first episode with so many dings that, I felt like I just had to get off on the right start. So,
fair point. I did dominate. I agree with you. Well said. Well, today's show, Michael, if you remember, is part 2 of our episode of last week's show. We had series regular and our partner, Jay Riera, on, and he joined us to discuss red flags and absentee physicians with consulting agreements. And it started getting me thinking about movies when there's a first movie that comes out, and it's great, and then there's a second one, and it's not so much.
Are you trying to suggest that this show will not be as good as the one we did with Jay's? Because if so, remember, our audience is listening and we want them to continue listening. And so I don't think it's good marketing to kind of call your shot that it's not going to be a good show.
No, honestly, Michael, the show is going to be amazing because I'm still on it.
Ding.
All right. So the reason I bring up the movies is, did you ever see the original Karate Kid movie?
Ding. Because you're bringing up old movies again. Although I will say you haven't been doing it as much this season. So all your therapy sessions are working. That's good. But secondly, ding. Well, of course I've seen it. I mean, that's a classic. I was borderline dating Elizabeth Shue back in the 80s.
I'm sure you were. Like your other girlfriend at Niagara Falls. All right. So you're right. Yes, the first movie did come out in 1984. But in my defense, it's vogue again because Netflix has released this TV series called Cobra Kai. And Cobra Kai is obviously decades later from the original Karate Kid movie tournament where Johnny and Daniel battle it out. And they just released season 4 at the last day of 2021. So it's the rivalry still exists. And so the movie reference, Karate Kid, is back in pop culture.
Okay, fine. I'm curious.
All right. Well, in 1986, going back to part 2 of the Karate Kid was released, and probably if you remember, it just was not nearly as good. It really lost a lot of its thunder. But it started thinking about, I know I'm not comparing us to Karate Kid 2, the movie, but I kept thinking about all the awesome lines and quotes that we all said and learned from the first Karate Kid movie. And do you remember any of them?
Yes, I've got them ingrained.
Right.
A few of the ones, of course, are tied to Daniel-san's training.
Right.
The wax on, wax off, and then paint the fence up, down. Yes,
Side to side.
yes, side to side, and then of course Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
No mercy and finish him.
Yes, those are great ones. All right, those last two from Cobra Kai, that was Johnny Sensei telling Johnny to sweep the leg, Danny, get him. And so someone yells out, and our age group might say, if someone yells out, sweep the leg, Johnny, that means show no mercy. So those who watch the movie, unlike Johnny Sensei, Daniel Sensei, Mr. Miyagi, he wanted to slow everything down and look at the bigger picture of what is in Daniel's trainings. So besides the statements like wax on, wax off, he'd say things like, first learn stand, then learn fly. Nature rule, Daniel-san, not me. And so point being is not, we would hear all these terms in the movie. And so 2 different cultures of fast and furious versus slow down and think about bigger pictures. So going back to our red flags, when we hear terms that a client is either getting hired as a medical director or a client is hiring the medical director.
Ding. Sorry, I'm just trained. Okay. When we hear the word medical director,
yes.
We know that it's an immediate red flag. But go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, and you're right. And so especially if we hear that term and the person's coming from a strong corporate practice medicine state, they'll say, well, we're going to, we're putting together an MSO model with this medical director, but the physician will own the professional entity. But they'll have nothing to do with the practice or the MSO. And
that's a context thing, Brad.
Okay.
So let's do a little bit of a vocab. And this is a common vocabulary word. I'm just going to assume that there's someone in our audience that needs context just like me and may not have corporate practice of medicine or CPOM tattooed on their neck like you do.
Yeah.
So,
all right, I'll take the CPOM, you take MSO.
Go.
So the corporate practice of medicine, or as Michael likes to refer to my rapper name, CPOM or CPOP or CPOPM. This is a state doctrine. It's every single state's different, but it's really developed to ensure that the licensed physicians or the entities wholly owned by licensed physicians are practicing medicine, thus limiting the commercialization of medicine by non-physicians. The underlying purpose of corporate practice medicine doctrine is to protect patients and preserve the integrity of the healthcare in the sense of who's providing the services, making sure that non-physicians are not interfering with patient care. Stated differently, this is a doctrine that restricts ownership of medical practices to just certain licensed physicians, and yes, there's some exemptions, but to ensure the concept all goes back to ensure patient care is held to the correct standard, which is typically the standard of care, and that's being controlled by physicians. So that's the concept. And I know we've discussed in other shows, but assuming our audience hadn't heard of other show, Michael, why don't you give the vocabulary of MSO?
Yeah, and again, we've had entire episodes just dealing with the MSO model, the management services organization model, and it goes hand in hand with corporate practice of medicine in the sense that it's the solution when you have non-doctors that are wanting to become involved in ownership of a business that's providing medical services. And so the MSO at the very highest level takes this concept of we're going to comply with the corporate practice of medicine that you just explained. So we're going to have a doctor-owned professional entity, or if they have an exception, it'll be compliant with within whatever those exceptions are. And then we're going to have another entity that is going to be owned by anyone and whoever the business owners are.
Sure.
And so you have two separate business entities, and you kind of marry those together through a contract called a management services agreement. And there's a lot that's just packed into there. But the general idea is we're going to be compliant and we're going to make the economics of the business arrangement work in a compliant way.
Yeah.
So with that kind of leads us as to why one of the reasons, or the biggest reasons, we get red flagged when we hear the word medical director is this idea, as we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, of the absentee physician, and just this thought that, we've got a medical director, we've got their license, but they don't have to do anything else. And that's where we get triggered and want to explore. So with that very full context in mind,
lots of context,
let's go into today's story.
All right. So last week, unlike last week's story where we had a consulting agreement and federal payers involved, this one we're not really dealing with any federal government payers.
Ding. Sorry. I heard federal payers. You said not have those, but I just said it's like a Pavlovian
yes, this is
response.
Fair to ding when you hear program payers.
Okay.
All right. So correct. This week's story is for elective medicine world, where patients are the payers and there's no commercial or federal payers involved.
And let's pause again. What do we mean when we're talking about elective medicine? And so when we talk about elective medicine, again, no insurance is involved. It's cash pay is another word you'll hear.
Yeah.
But what you'll see is medical spas, cosmetic centers or cosmetic practices, weight loss centers, wellness centers, IV hydration bars, but the common element is cash pay.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking in our story today and we're talking about cosmetics, or that understand audience that this concept applies to really any kind of cash pay based elective medicine type model.
Agree. Our client in this story is an entrepreneur. He has no medical background, but has started multiple other companies and other industries over his lifetime. Extremely intelligent, fast learner on all these new industries. We will call him Johnny.
Sweet leg. I'm assuming that you're sticking with the Karate Kid theme there with the name Johnny.
Yes, good catch there. Yes, and Johnny is well read on the cosmetic industry. He has researched this, has decided to work with a plastic surgeon, has been a patient of them, has a great grasp of the cosmetic market in general, hired local counsel to assist with acquiring a med spa in the state of California.
Ding. I'm sorry. When you say California, it's not just a strong corporate practice of medicine state. It's everything is extra, including the enforcement. And so that's like, we just have an automatic ding that we have when we are doing work in California, because we know the stakes are going to be a little bit higher.
Well, just get ready, buddy. Here we go. All right. The local council has noted to Johnny that although he can buy the med spa for the nurse that currently owns it,
ding,
Johnny needs to get a doctor involved as the medical director.
Ding.
Johnny agrees that the doctor should be involved and finds a radiologist,
ding, ding,
to be the medical director, Dr. Kreese.
Dr. Kreese, explain.
Kreese was Johnny's sensei of the Cobra Kai karate school.
No mercy.
No mercy.
Yeah. Okay, well, just keep rolling with this karate kid.
All right, so Dr. Kreese, a friend of Johnny's, works full-time at a hospital,
Ding.
Has never been inside a med spa,
Ding.
Much less has any cosmetic training.
Ding.
He just, I'll just get some mailbox money is what the doctor said.
Ding, ding.
So Johnny was going to hire that nurse who currently owns the med spa to be the sole employee of Johnny's new med spa.
Ding.
Killing it, huh?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna win the contest this week. That's all I'm gonna say.
Michael, I thought we agreed that's not a contest. Who can ding more?
Yeah, right.
Like kidding. Of course, it's a competition, and everyone knows I'm winning this season's ding contest.
Okay, moving on. But that's not true. Moving on. I thought you said an MSO was part of this story. When's the MSO pop in?
You were paying attention. Thank you for paying attention, sir. Well, Dr. Kreese, he was smart enough to hire an attorney to review the medical director agreement. And Dr. Kreese's counsel noted that, hey, you're in California. And I remember once reading something that you can't own a med spa. Only Dr. Kreese can actually own it.
Well, that's like the anti-ding. That sounds promising.
Yes, it sounds promising. The party agrees to form a new professional entity in California, which Dr. Kreese will own it. And he will, and then the employees will be able to work under Dr. Kreese's license.
Ding.
And Dr. Kreese will just receive about $500 a month.
Ding. Wow. Can we stop? I can't keep track of all these red flags, but you hear this work under the license thing, and I think we just naturally know that that what they're selling is their license and not much else. And then what else are you going to do for $500 a month? You're not going to be expected to do very much, or you're not going to agree to do very much for that amount of money.
But Michael, like all commercials, but wait, there's more.
Oh, great.
Johnny has made it clear to Dr. Kreese he'll have no ownership of the MSO. He will not have to do any work on behalf of the professional entity.
Ding.
As the nurse who will take care of all the patient care as she's been providing cosmetic services over the last 12 years.
Ding. Okay. Well, how did we get involved?
Well, you'll love this one. The Cobra Kai Med Spa was operational for about 2 years with no problems until Dr. Kreese received a letter from the medical board.
Ding.
Yeah. On a nurse practitioner was operating under his license without following the proper standard of care.
Ding.
Yeah. We got a call from one of our physician clients in California, and they were friends, so he sent them our way, which brings us to date.
Okay, wow. Well, first of all, kudos for slipping in Cobra Kai as a med spa as a term, and I approve that message anyway.
At the Cobra Kai Med Spa, would they show no mercy, and would you want to go there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the injection may, leave you in a really bad position. You would know. People would know when they saw your face afterwards, for sure. Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack there, Brad, and so let's go on a commercial break. On the other side, we can kind of talk through the different dings and red flags, and just remember, the absentee physician is the central issue here. We can kind of unpack the different pieces.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto. I'm still here with my co-host, Michael Byrd. And Michael, during commercial break, it was confirmed that our off-camera, our podcast extraordinary, the person who helps make us sound so good, Riley agreed that Cobra Kai is pretty cool. So it is hip, and because we're old and she's very young, so it makes it's going back. But all right, back from commercial break. Let's just finish the story. For some reason, you dinged me a lot. I think mostly because you were trying to win the competition. But in reality, I guess there was a ton of dings. One of the first dings that you hit me with was the question on when I said the word medical director. Why did you ding that?
Well, first, let me start is that there was just an implied ding a minute ago when you called yourself hip, but we'll move on.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough.
So why ding the term medical director?
Yeah.
So, first of all, it has become a very generic term that means a lot. Kind of like, Kleenex is a term that is at one time was specific to a brand, and now it's just a very broad term. We sometimes to bring in the fact that here in Texas, when someone says they want a Coke, it could mean any kind of soda.
Absolutely.
And so we know when we hear the term medical director, it really doesn't mean much. Like we need to know more to understand what in the world's going on. But even within the corporate practice of medicine world that we're talking about, we've seen everything. I mean, we did a whole episode a few seasons ago where we had someone that was being asked to be a medical director, and he was being asked to sign on as a general partner.
That's right.
In the agreement. We see him coming on as independent contractors, but they're really allowing, the quote MSO or the other entity to be the entity that's practicing medicine. So there are so many different meanings to it that it's an auto red flag.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a show. We did the core practice of medicine, a preventable death to your practice, the one out in North Carolina, when the client didn't even know that the state had that role of just being a medical director. But in this story, Dr. Crease's attorney identified early on that Johnny would not own the PC, which is great. That's important, as you said. That's a non-ding. And that they needed a doctor to own that professional corporation. But you dinged me when I mentioned that Doc was a radiologist. Why was that?
Well, let me explain, because there is a compelling or compliant point there, and that is the rule in the corporate practice of medicine state in California, when you have to have a physician own an entity, is they just have to be licensed in the state. So
That's
from
right.
that standpoint, he's great.
Yeah.
But we know when we hear radiologists that's all they're planning to do, because they don't even know anything about the rest of it. And
Right.
so that's a big red flag that they're probably going down a non-compliant path.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that just having a physician involved like that is not, again, that they solves all the issues. So you also dinged me when Dr. Crease was working full time at another facility, and that the nurse was going to be providing all the patient care. And I know that is a lot to unpack by just where you dinged me.
Yeah, I mean, and it ties into this absentee physician concept. So, the first flag we just talked about, it's okay, we know he doesn't have the skills. So we have someone who's supposed to be supervising and delegating, yet they don't even know this area
Right.
in which they're going to do it. And now we find out that he's working full time somewhere else, completely disengaged from this business. which means there's not going to be any actual supervision going. So it's really going down this path of truly, I'm selling my license for a monthly fee.
Yeah. And I think the other piece that you probably want to concentrate on is we've talked about in many other shows is the good faith exam issue.
Yeah. So if what we do know is that in a chain of care in every state, when a new patient comes in, they have to receive a diagnosis and a treatment plan. In California, it's actually called a good faith exam.
That's where it originated. Yeah.
And the concept here is that someone that has the scope of practice to exercise independent medical judgment has to be able to review the patient history, look at them, and determine that whatever it is that's a medical treatment that they're going to get is appropriate. That's done by a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a PA. And so when you hear full-time doctor engaged somewhere else who also is a radiologist, you're like, okay, well, clearly he's not going to be doing the GFE.
Yep.
And so, that's again, another flag that needs to be explored because it's usually an indicator of a problem.
Yeah. And those are great points. And I think the part that a lot of people need to understand is a nurse can't prescribe a treatment plan. It's outside the scope of their practice authority. They can definitely get in trouble with their nursing board and definitely get in trouble with the medical board. And as you said, they need a doctor or a PA or NP really to clear those persons. And on our story where the nurse, even though the nurse has been providing these cosmetic services for over 12 years and may know more about it than a lot of physicians, it's still outside of the scope to clear patients from medical treatments, and because they are diagnosing, prescribing a drug or prescribing a medical equipment or prescribing a medical grade chemical of some sort.
Correct points.
What other risk factors do you see you said you talked about supervising physicians? So let's talk about some of those other risk factors that you're dinging.
Yeah. So clearly, the thing that's front and center is patient care. Yeah. And I say front and center because that's what the board ultimately cares about. You started this episode early on talking about the importance of patient safety and the focal point. And that's what the boards are looking at. And we see the consequences in a board action oftentimes directly tie into, did someone get hurt or not? We call it, if there's no patient harm, we call it a technical violation. But there are certain aspects when you have a quote medical director, supervising physician involved that may not really feel like they're part of the chain of care. Mm-hmm. But there are things that some boards care about. California sometimes cares about it more than other states, but there are definitely risk factors that have to be talked about. So we're talking about the MSO. We often see the mid levels, the RNs staffed in the MSO, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to have that conversation of what state are you in? What's that going to look like? Is it clear that they may be employed by the MSO, but they're being supervised by the professional entity? And even when you do that, a medical board may not like it because they're going to have to. This isn't what they're doing every day.
Yeah, and
they're gonna be fixated on this. You have a nurse employed by a non-professional entity, and how do you work around that? There's other areas of financial controls that you got to think about, and so again, some states look at it more than others. But an idea between the MSO is they're providing these turnkey services to the practice. The flip side is that a truly absentee physician all of a sudden shows up where the doctor may own the entity, but they don't know anything about what's going on in the business. They don't know where the bank accounts are. And so sometimes boards will actually start digging into that as a thread to pull to say, hey, we got an absentee physician here that's doing nothing. The patients are in danger. They don't even know where they do their banking. And so it's a conversation worth having.
Yep.
We encourage, even when that's being done turnkey by the MSO, that there's a channel of communication with the doctor so that the doctor's aware of what's going on the business side in addition to the patient care side.
Yeah, and I think you got a great point there is that the patient care typically is the most crucial aspect. But again, we're looking at all the red flags that we heard in this story. And so we just want to make sure our audience understands how a board would look at each one.
Yeah. So tell us, what's the status of the case against Dr. Crease?
Well, for those who know or don't know, the wheels of the California Medical Board turned extremely slow. We have local counsel working with the California Medical Board, but we still haven't had much progress yet as to what is the next phase of this investigation. However, Dr. Crease has terminated his relationship by terminating his MSA, and he actually had a medical director agreement with his own PC with Johnny's Med Spa. So there, last we heard through counsel is that Johnny's looking for a new doctor to work with. But the story is a perfect example of someone who feels like they're compliant because they went out and got an MSA with a physician, and they think that that's sufficient for the MSO model. I mean, that is an important step to have that management service agreement. That's part of it, but it doesn't by itself make it a complete compliant MSO model. And the other takeaway would just be to understand that for Johnny, he may not have been brought into this medical board investigation, but he's basically shut down right now because he's trying to find another doctor to actually build one compliantly. And full disclosure, we do not represent Cobra Kai Med Spa. So I don't know what the status of Johnny is right now. And Michael, what are some of your final thoughts?
Well, first, if it was actually called Cobra Kai Med Spa, we would need to represent them. but
yes, Riley approves that statement.
Yes. Elizabeth Shue was a really important girlfriend of mine in the 80s. But Brad, she was an absentee girlfriend.
Oh.
Like I never saw her. And so that caused a lot of problems. And so I would just say this, that, it may not have actually been a real girlfriend because I never actually saw her. And so if you have a med spa with an absentee doctor who's never there and never doing anything, you may have some similar problems to me. You might need to call me for some therapy.
Fair enough. So sorry to hear about your absentee girlfriend. Join us next Wednesday. We have another new show. Red flags, non-competes are not enforceable.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.